In the tapestry of human history, one thread shines with divine purpose, the saga of Israel's 12 tribes. Dr. Gene Scott, a preacher with fire in his soul, stood before his flock and declared, "God's promises never fail." His voice, a thunderclap of conviction, echoed through decades, urging us to chase the tribe's hidden paths. From the sands of Canaan to the farthest reaches of the earth, these tribes, born of Abraham's covenant, carried a destiny to become nations, to shape civilizations, to prove God's unyielding faithfulness. This is no mere tale of ancient kings. It's a mystery that spans millennia, a quest to find God's people, lost yet never forgotten, their trails woven into the fabric of time. Welcome to part 1 of our journey, Covenant Forged, Tribes Divided. The Covenant of Abraham. 4,000 years ago in the desert of Ur, God called a man named Abram. He spoke words that would echo through time, etched in the heart of history. "I will make of thee a great nation, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. Abram, renamed Abraham, received a covenant sealed in faith. "Thy seed shall be as the stars of heaven, and as the sand upon the seashore." Genesis chapter 22, verse 17. Dr. Scott hammered this truth with unyielding force. God's word is not a suggestion, it's a contract. This promise, a divine oath passed to Isaac, Abraham's son, born of a miracle to Sarah in her old age. Isaac's son Jacob, wrestling with God and renamed Israel, fathered 12 sons, each a tribe, each a pillar of a divine plan that would reshape the world. Scott taught us that Abraham's seed was not just a family, but a multitude destined to fill the earth with nations, their influence a testament to God's vow. Jacob's blessing to his sons, recorded in Genesis chapter 49, set their paths. Judah to bear the scepter of kingship, a royal line leading to the Messiah. Joseph to wield the birthright of abundance and multitude, his seed to become nations. Yet human sin would test this covenant, scattering the tribes across the ages, but never breaking God's solemn vow, a promise as enduring as the stars. The covenant was not merely land or wealth, but a divine mandate of influence, a seed to bless all peoples, a legacy that would endure through trials, exiles, and the mists of time. The rise and fall of a united kingdom. The tribes grew in Egypt, forged in the crucible of slavery, their cries rising to God under Pharaoh's relentless lash. Through Moses, God delivered them, a miracle of parted seas and manna from heaven, leading them through the Red Sea to the promised land of Canaan. There, under Joshua's sword, they conquered cities, claiming the inheritance sworn to Abraham, a land flowing with milk and honey. Centuries later, under King Saul, the tribes united as a kingdom, but it was David, the shepherd king, who brought glory to Israel. David's reign, marked by conquest and psalms, established a throne God promised would endure forever. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 16. His son Solomon built a temple in Jerusalem, its gold and cedar a beacon to nations, drawing even the Queen of Sheba to marvel at its splendor. 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 through 13. But Solomon's heart strayed, lured by foreign wives and their idols, a betrayal that defied the God who exalted him. Scott warned, his voice a clarion call, sin splits what God unites. Solomon's idolatry sowed seeds of division, and upon his death the kingdom tore in two, a wound that bled for centuries. In 930 BC, God's judgment fell, splitting Israel into two nations, a fracture that would shape their destinies and scatter their paths. 10 tribes, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, formed the northern kingdom, called the House of Israel, or Ephraim after its leading tribe. They chose Jeroboam, a servant of Solomon, as king, a man who led them further from God with golden calves. 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 28 through 30. 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, with Levite priests, formed the southern kingdom, the House of Judah, under Rehoboam, Solomon's son and heir. This division was no mere politics, Scott thundered, but God's design to separate the birthright from the scepter, a divine blueprint for the tribe's destinies. The birthright and the scepter. Jacob's prophecy in Genesis chapter 49, verse 10 was clear as crystal, a roadmap for the ages. Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, received the birthright, a promise of multitude, of nations springing from their seed. Judah, however, held the scepter, the right to rule until Shiloh, the Messiah, comes. Scott drove this home with relentless clarity. The birthright and scepter are distinct. Misread this, and you lose God's plan. When Jacob blessed Joseph's sons, he crossed his hands, placing Ephraim, the younger, above Manasseh, Genesis chapter 48, verses 17 through 20. Ephraim was destined to become a company of nations, a multitude spreading across the earth, their influence vast as the seas. Manasseh too would be great, but secondary to his brother, a nation of strength. Judah's line, through kings like David and Solomon, would bear the royal seed, culminating in the promised Messiah, Jesus Christ. This separation shaped the tribe's fates, a divine dichotomy written in prophecy. The northern kingdom, led by Ephraim, carried the name Israel and the promise of nations, a multitude in the making. The southern kingdom, Judah, held the royal line, its king sitting on David's throne in Jerusalem, guardians of the scepter. Scott insisted we grasp this distinction, for it unlocks the mystery of where the tribes went and how God's promises played out through the corridors of history. The scarlet thread of Zara and Pharez. In Judah's lineage, a strange and wondrous tale unfolds, one Scott called a prophetic marker of God's hand, a signpost for the ages. Judah, through his daughter-in-law Tamar, fathered twin sons, Zara and Pharez, Genesis chapter 38, verses 27 through 30. At birth, Zara's hand emerged first, tied with a scarlet thread by the midwife, a sign of first claim to the birthright. Yet Pharez pushed through, breaching the womb, taking the birthright and the path to greatness, a divine reversal. Scott saw divine purpose in this drama. The scarlet thread is God's signature. Pharez's line stretched through history, leading to King David, to Zedekiah, Judah's last king, and ultimately to Jesus Christ, the Lion of Judah, the true Shiloh. But Zara's seed, noted for their wisdom in ancient texts, held a different destiny, a path less trodden but no less divine. Scott speculated that Zara's descendants, marked by that scarlet thread, may have wandered beyond Canaan, their wisdom seeding distant lands, carrying Judah's legacy where Pharez's throne did not reach. Scott linked this thread to other biblical signs like Rahab's scarlet cord in Jericho, Joshua chapter 2 verse 18, a symbol of God's preservation through unlikely vessels, a pattern of divine fidelity. The scarlet thread, he urged, is a clue to the tribe's hidden paths, a marker that God's plan extends beyond Jerusalem's walls, into the unknown. Ancient legends say that Zara's descendants, known for their wisdom, may have journeyed east to found the city of Troy. From there, survivors would later sail westward, planting royal lineages that would echo through the empires of Europe. The Assyrian exile of Israel, the northern tribes, free from Judah's rule, soon fell into deep idolatry, erecting golden calves in Bethel and Dan, defying the God who delivered them from Egypt's chains. Scott lamented, his voice heavy with sorrow. They chose rebellion and reaped exile. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire, fierce and unrelenting, struck like a hammer on Samaria, Israel's capital, 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6. The tribes were chained, their families torn apart, marched into exile to Hala, Habor, and the cities of the Medes. Their cities left desolate, their names erased from history's ledger. Unlike Judah, they never returned, vanishing into the mists of time, a people lost to the ages. Dr. Scott, with Hosea's prophecy ablaze in his voice, declared, Israel shall abide many days without a king, yet return to seek their God and David's throne. Hosea chapter 3, verses 4 through 5. The Assyrian exile of 722 BC was no divine failure, but a masterstroke of God's covenant. The tribes, Dan, Ephraim, Asher, and more, were scattered to Hala and Habor, their names lost, but their seed destined to multiply as nations. Scott thundered, God sent them to earth's farthest corners, their paths hidden until the regathering. Ancient records, like the Assyrian annals, confirm Samaria's fall, with captives scattered across their vast domain from Media to Mesopotamia. Yet whispers of their survival persisted, stirring hearts to seek them, to believe that Abraham's seed could not perish, that God's vow held firm. The Babylonian captivity of Judah. Judah, the southern kingdom, was not spared God's judgment. For generations they ignored prophets sent to warn them, none more pivotal than Jeremiah, a man God sanctified before birth. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. Scott marveled at his calling. Jeremiah was no mere doomsayer, but God's agent to preserve a throne. Jeremiah prophesied Judah's fall, calling King Zedekiah to surrender to Babylon's Nebuchadnezzar, Jeremiah chapter 27, verse 12. Zedekiah refused, his pride sealing Jerusalem's doom. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's armies crushed the city. its temple burned, its walls shattered. 2 Kings chapter 25, verses 8 through 10. The king's sons were slain before his eyes, then his eyes were put out, and he was chained to Babylon, never to see it. Scott noted the precision of prophecy. Jeremiah said Zedekiah would go to Babylon. Jeremiah chapter 34, verse 3. Ezekiel said he'd never see it. Ezekiel chapter 12, verse 13. Both were fulfilled in chilling detail. Yet God spared Zedekiah's daughters, entrusted to Jeremiah, who escaped the slaughter with divine protection. Scott insisted, his voice rising, this was no accident. God's plan moved forward through these women, a thread of hope in ruin. Unlike Israel, Judah returned from Babylon after 70 years, rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple under Ezra and Nehemiah. But the northern tribes, the house of Israel, remained lost, their fate a mystery that burned in Scott's heart. Jeremiah's mission to plant. Jeremiah's calling was twofold, a mandate from God himself, to uproot nations and to build and plant, Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 10. Scott emphasized the planting, his eyes alight with vision. Everyone sees the destruction, but who sees God's restoration? God commissioned Jeremiah over nations, not just Judah, but Israel too, a scope as vast as the covenant. When Jerusalem fell, Jeremiah's work was not done. With Zedekiah's daughters, he fled first to Egypt against God's command, Jeremiah chapter 43, verse 7. But Scott believed this was part of a greater plan, a journey to preserve David's throne, a mission veiled in mystery. Scott proclaimed Jeremiah God's architect of hope, ordained over nations to uproot and to plant. He wasn't just prophesying doom, Scott roared, he was building a throne to shine like the sun. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 10 commissioned him to tear down Judah's rebellion, yet preserve David's line through Zedekiah's daughters. Escaping Babylon's slaughter, Jeremiah carried this royal seed perhaps to distant shores. Scott insisted God's promise to David, his throne forever, was no idle word. God promised David, his seed shall endure forever, his throne as the sun before me. Psalms chapter 89, verse 36. Could Jeremiah have carried this throne, through Zedekiah's daughters, to a new land, a hidden refuge? Scott declared this mystery the hinge of the tribe's story, a pivot point where God's faithfulness turned defeat into destiny. Jeremiah's planting, he urged, is the key to finding where God's people went, a testament to his unyielding faithfulness, a light in the darkness. The search for the lost tribes. Even in ancient times, the tribe's fate stirred hearts to seek them, a quest that spanned centuries and continents. A Jewish historian, Josephus, wrote of an immense multitude dwelling beyond the Euphrates, their numbers vast, their identity enduring. Antiquities, Book 11, Chapter 5, Section 2. Another ancient text, 2nd Esdras, tells of Naphtali's exiles in Nineveh, clinging to their faith amid captivity, a flicker of Israel's flame. Scott cited these as proof, his voice a rallying cry. The tribes lived on. In the 9th century, a traveler, Eldad Hadani, claimed to find them in Ethiopia, a kingdom of warriors keeping God's law, their swords gleaming with purpose. In the 12th century, Benjamin of Tudela found scholarly tribes near the river Gozan, their swords sharp, their scrolls sacred, a remnant of Israel's covenant. Scott, with a detective's zeal, traced God's breadcrumbs across history. The tribes left signs from Khazar steppes to Ireland's emerald shores. He saw Dan's seed in the Khazars, nomads of the 8th century, their monotheism a faint echo of Israel's faith, marching toward Europe. In Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann, arriving a millennium before Christ, bore Dan's name and sacred traditions, perhaps even the Stone of Destiny. Scott roared, "These are God's markers, proving his covenant lives in distant lands." Among those markers is a trail left by the tribe of Dan, like a serpent across the map, etched in names like the Danube, the Dniester, and even Denmark. As Scott noted, Dan didn't build nations, he left tracks. Scott called these seekers God's fishers and hunters. Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 16, sent to gather his scattered people, a divine mission across time. He warned that some searches went astray, twisting truth with wild claims, yet the quest must continue. The tribes, Scott believed, carry Abraham's covenant to distant lands, their trails waiting to be uncovered, a mystery that demands pursuit. The tribes of Israel vanished into exile, yet their story burns with divine purpose, a fire that cannot be quenched. Dr. Scott thundered, God keeps his word, his people endure. Abraham's covenant, Jacob's prophecy, Judah's scepter, Ephraim's birthright, these cannot fail, no matter the centuries that pass. Where did the tribes go? From the ruins of Troy to the sands of Egypt, from Scythian steppes to Celtic shores, their trails whisper of God's plan, a tapestry yet to be fully revealed. Join us in part 2, as we chase Israel's tribes across the ancient world, where stones, thrones, and legends unveil an unbroken promise, a covenant that spans the ages, binding past to future. Thank you for watching.